a decomposing goat carcass in a bathtub, and an 8-month-old infant. The child's parents were taken into custody, and you won't believe what police say their reaction was when they learned that their child would be taken away. The chief of police said what he saw inside the home was so disgusting that, quote, "In my 30 years of service, I have never encountered such a horrific situation involving unsanitary conditions and such a large number of animals." We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. This is the type of story where you need to read the headline twice because it is so shocking. These are pictures that the Honea Path, South Carolina police sent us of what they found inside a home on May 19th. It is a home filled with animals, feces, and garbage. Some animals are in their cages, like dogs and raccoons. Others seem to be walking freely through the home. In total, police say they found 47 animals: raccoons, chickens, dogs, and cats. Here's one picture they sent us of a raccoon in its cage inside the home. Now, the pictures really hit home, though, for as sensational as all of this is. You look at this picture, and that's a crib inside a messy room, and you can see the garbage that's on the floor alongside that crib. Police say they found an 8-month-old child in this house. That child was taken out of the home by officers, and it is reportedly now in the custody of a family member. Now, not only did police say they found living animals inside the home, they also allegedly found a decomposing goat carcass in a bathtub. Police say they were called to this house in Anderson County, South Carolina, about 3 hours from Atlanta, after they say they had a request from the Department of Social Services that were concerned about the living conditions. And from those pictures, you can certainly see why. Here's a picture of the house per Google Maps. In this picture, what you see on the outside, it looks somewhat well kept, but police say it is likely the house will be considered inhabitable after what they found inside the home. And here are the two people who were arrested, who police say are responsible for everything that you see in those pictures. The parents of the infant, Michael Foley and Kayla Renard. Both of them are now facing charges, including unlawfully placing a child at risk or causing harm, and also facing charges related to animal abuse. Now, here's a quote that the local police chief gave a local TV station, WKRC in South Carolina, about this couple. He said, quote, "Sitting there calm and really no emotion, no facial expressions. You would think that they'd be a little upset that someone was taking their 8-month-old baby, that the police were there and discovered the horrific conditions of this house. You would think that they would have to know that they were in trouble." But apparently, from what the chief is saying, it didn't appear like this couple seemed to recognize the trouble that they were allegedly in. Now, here are some more pictures to help you paint the scene of what this couple was living in, what this child was living in inside the home. You can see on the left side of your screen here, there is the crib that we believe that that child was sleeping in. And at 8 months old, you have to think that the child was also crawling, and you can see just how dirty the floor was. Now, we searched for this couple on social media, and we did find a profile for Kayla Renard, and she presents a very different image online. Here's a picture of her with a dog. Here's another picture of some of her animals that she posted on Facebook. And here's a picture of her and Foley on social media. A collage of pictures with, yes, more animals. Now, this stood out to us on Facebook. This is a post from September of last year where Renard writes, quote, "Says he loves dogs, but him and his girlfriend rescued 4 dogs just for him to dump them, and he tied onto a tree so it had even less of a chance at survival because it could not go find food and water." Now, who she's talking about, it's unclear when you look at that post, but it certainly stood out to us considering everything that we saw in the pictures inside the house. Renard and Foley were both given $10,000 bonds. At the time of this recording, they are not listed as being in custody in the Anderson County, South Carolina jail. Hey, by the way, the stories that we cover here at Law and Crime prove that life can be unpredictable and having a great attorney matters. And that's where our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, come in. In the past few months, Morgan & Morgan secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash in Florida, a $5.6 million verdict for another car accident victim in Atlanta, not to mention $1.8 million in Kentucky after insurance offered them a mere $5,000 in that case. So even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, Why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you're injured and you need to file a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description. The local police chief said that the 8-month-old child was put in the care of a relative. The chief told WYFF-TV that the child is okay and was in, quote, pretty good condition for the unsanitary condition of the house. Now, as for the 47 animals that were found in the home, there's a local animal shelter that was called in to help. And the head of that shelter told WYFF that the amount of feces and ammonia in the air of the home made it very difficult to breathe, which also makes you think back to this 8-month-old child and what that child must have been breathing in as they lived in that home. The head of that animal shelter told the TV station as well, she didn't see any bowls of water in the house. Joining us now from South Carolina to talk about this case is Chad Ayers, former sheriff's deputy, also the founder of Proactive Response Group, which focuses on active shooter response. But in this case, Chad, just it's hard to believe 47 animals with this 8-month-old in the house. It's hard to know even where to begin when you read everything that was discovered inside of this home. But first, just this community, Anderson County, South Carolina, where all of this happened, and set the scene for us of Honea Path, South Carolina, and this community.
Sure. Obviously, I'm based out of Greenville, South Carolina. Anderson is winning county over. I mean, I'm 25 minutes from that Honea Path, Belton area. I know it very well. My college roommate grew up in that area, but more of like a farm type town, very rural community. Not a lot of, we're definitely not in a metropolitan type area down there, though it butts up to some larger manufacturing settings, but very kind of desolate. And honestly, like you mentioned, it's embarrassing in a sense that this is in the next county over. Obviously, nowhere is not susceptible to these types of calls or reports, but it's just mind blowing to me. It breaks my heart as a new father myself to imagine an infant living in these types of conditions. I mean, it almost sounds like a scene out of a Deliverance movie or something.
It really is. I mean, 47 animals found in the home: raccoons, rabbits, chickens, dogs, cats. And I had to read this twice. A decomposing goat carcass also found in the home. I mean, in these types of cases, well, I guess first of all, if you've dealt with hoarding cases in the past in your career, I mean, have you ever seen anything like this?
Honestly, this is not, again, anything surprising. I'd venture to say in most law enforcement officers' career, at some time during that career, you're going to deal with a case like this, and it's mind blowing. Obviously, we all have friends or family members who would fit the definition of a hoarder, and that's maybe because of excess magazines or Tupperware containers stacked up in the closet. But having that amount of animals and feces, urine all through the residence, and to put on top of that, like you mentioned, a goat carcass. I mean, come on. It's not giving the upstate of South Carolina a good name or a good rap, but obviously you handle each of them the same way. Obviously throwing an infant or putting a child in the home is a little bit different. But there's resources out there as well of getting people help. I think what happens is this stuff starts to pile on over time, and then you just get basically you're underwater or under animals in this case, and it's too late at that point to do anything. You basically burn the place to the ground.
Right, because I mean, this isn't something that happened overnight where suddenly they had dozens of animals in the home, and then you have a child in the home as well. But what is, I mean, how you spoke to it a little bit of how it just kind of compiles over time, but still, like, how does it get to this point in these cases, whether it's animals, whether it's some of these other hoarding cases that we typically see, where people eventually find themselves in a spot where you have dozens of animals in your house. And it's really not just about the animals, and certainly the animal safety, the baby, all of that's really important. Just the health conditions that they must have been living in is hard to imagine.
I think what sticks out to me a lot of times when I dealt with these types of calls, There was obviously substance abuse involved, whether that was, alcohol or drugs. Because at that point, and I'm not saying that having to do with this case whatsoever. I understand there's cases where I think people may say they fall to hard times and they just didn't have any resources, but there's absolutely zero excuse to get to this point where you have a freaking petting zoo in your residence, your trailer, whatever it was in. My question is, where was the friends? Where were the families? You can't tell me this. Nobody in 8 months came over to visit your newborn child. You know, why didn't anyone step up to the plate before now? And I don't know. I was unable to find any information on what led police to come out there. I know that they went to go do a welfare check, but they're kind of being tight-lipped as to who that was. But obviously, you put a child involved, you put an elderly person involved, these types of living conditions. It's a good way to get Chad Ayers pretty angry. We're talking about the most innocent people that we have, and you can't even provide, basic needs or a basic healthy living condition for this child. It breaks my heart for the kids. Look, if you want to live in a house and destroy it and live in feces and urine and have 40 animals, that's on you. You introduce a child into this or an elderly person that you're supposed to be looking after, well, now you're really going to piss me off.
Well, yeah, because I also think too, I mean, the health conditions, and there was feces in the house, a decomposing, like it's just hard to keep saying, it was a decomposing goat carcass that was found inside the home as well. What are some of the, and I know you're not a doctor, but you've responded to some of these cases. I mean, I think of some of the health concerns you would have in the air, especially for an infant to be breathing that.
Well, like you mentioned, well, one, again, it's still mind blowing to me. Like, at what point in life do you wake up and you're like, hey, babe, uh, let's go get a goat and put it in the shower? This is just strange things here. But anyway, of course, with any type of feces or the strong ammonia in the air from the urine of these animals, but I'm more worried about, the E. coli and any type of bacteria. At some point, an 8 month old, if they're not already, they're crawling. So you can imagine what they're crawling through, getting on their hands. And what do kids do? They shove their fingers in their mouth 24/7. Um, but thank God law enforcement stepped up to the plate. Look, Chief Miller is a dear friend of mine, the chief of police down there. Worked with him for many years. Have a lot of respect for Chief Miller. He does a great job. And I'm telling you, he's got a zero tolerance for innocent children or vulnerable adults, being in these types of conditions. So thank God they were able to remove this child and get them into some temporary care where they're in a better living environment.
No, and I know he's a longtime member of law enforcement and wrote on Facebook that he had never seen anything like this. And I think he said it's 30 years of law enforcement, which is saying a lot. I think of this community, it's a rural community, and there's just that question of how could this have gone on for so long, even for a child to be brought in, where were the friends? Do you find in more rural communities, and this is not a knock on rural communities or anything like that, but because of people living away from the big cities, that sometimes they can fly under the radar and it can be hard to detect some of these cases?
I don't know if it's that or if it's more of in 2025, we just don't want to get involved in people's business. Friends, family, neighbors. Sometimes I think people think it's safer just to let them live their life. I'm going to live mine. I don't live my life. I don't keep my household in this type of condition, but that's the way they may do it. Again, it's not just two, people living in this house. We have a child in here. That's what brings this thing to a whole new level. I'll be honest. I don't think this would receive the news that it had there not been an infant child in the house. If it's just two people that choose to live in these type of deplorable conditions, all right, you introduce a child in. But again, I think you actually see this whether you're in a rural or more urban type environment. People don't want to get involved in other people's business. But when we have innocent children involved, we have to step up to the plate and report this immediately. Because the last thing you would want, I think you would agree, is something ended up happening to this child, and then you noticed it, 5 months ago and didn't say anything. So again, look, it's kind of like we see in the airport all the time. That was the big famous thing from the sex trafficking stuff or human trafficking. If you see something, say something. If it doesn't sit right, makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, probably need to let law enforcement know. There's plenty of anonymous reporting lines out there, to notify law enforcement in situations like this if you don't want your name out there. But the last thing you want is something to happen to an elderly person or a child. And again, it's not like this was just the house is a little dirty. This is disgusting. I wouldn't have even let my own dog into this house, much less a child.
If a child wasn't in the home, would this still be a criminal case? Is it illegal to have, would police prosecute a case, or the local district attorney prosecute a case of having 47 animals in your house, even in deplorable conditions, and a decomposing goat carcass?
100%. I think the deplorable conditions and a lot would determine on the condition of those animals. I think it's very hard, whether it's chickens, cats, dogs, a mixture of everything, including a goat. I think it's going to be very hard to take care in a humane way that many animals. So yes, I don't think it would have mattered. I think law enforcement would have stepped up to the plate, and probably deemed this residence to be incohabitable. Not, you can't even live here. They would have condemned the place immediately in the situations, child or no child, in that type of situation.
And for the child, I mean, what's both of their parents in custody facing serious charges. That child's now in custody of, I believe, the state, or the local child services agency. What's the reality for that child going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, a lot of times what DSS, our Department of Social Services, will try first is to reach out to a family member. As easy as we can, we want to try to keep them with their families, as we don't want to separate them, from everybody and put them just in a foster home. So if DSS can find a family, they're going to go to that house first, do a background check, make sure those living conditions are a heck of a lot better than they were in. If they deem to where, hey, look, grandma, aunt and uncle, brother, sisters, their place is no better, then yes, they're going to resort putting them into the foster care system, where that child's going to be until DSS can get a plan in place for this. I don't know if they were husband or wife or just cohabitating with the child, but they're going to get them on a plan, and there's going to have to be a lot of changes made. Obviously, they won't. That place is getting condemned, but they're going to have to show that, look, we were living in a manner that obviously was disgusting, and we've been here for the last 6 months in our new place. You can see that it is fit for a child. But honestly, with the no reaction from the parents
Right.
when law enforcement interviewed them, it's like, I lost my 8-month-old. I mean, that's the part that's so shocking to me. And maybe it's because I have a newborn, but my heart goes out to that kid. I would do anything for my child, like most parents would do. And now your 8-month-old has just been basically ripped from you, rightfully so, and you don't care.
Well, I was just going to say, it's also too, like, thinking of, because there were pictures that Chief Miller sent to us, and there's a crib, and you see the crib, and then there's just crates and places where these animals were right near the crib. And it's just, how does the alarm bell not go off if you're a parent in the house of, like, this isn't good for the 8-month-old? And yeah, it was reported that they didn't have really any reaction when they were told, and it was almost as if they didn't realize that any of this was wrong. In hoarding situations that you've seen, and gosh, neglect cases, I think of, where there's a child involved, I mean, how often does the parent not just seem to realize what exactly is going on around them? And that's certainly not an excuse for any of it, but just the awareness aspect isn't there.
Well, there's always an excuse on the hoarding issue. I will say that there's always an excuse of, you know, why it's gotten this bad, or hey, it wasn't this bad 2 months ago. There's always some type of excuse on that end. But we've been talking about the health side of this, right? And you see the pictures of the crib next to all these cages. How about, like, being bit by a raccoon or a rabid animal that's in this house? I mean, we got 40 something animals running through this house, including a dead goat that was probably alive at some point in the house. So where's not the fear or worried about this child being bit and contracting some type of disease or rabies or something like that? But as far as the remorse go, it's all situationally dependent. I've seen some where the parents just break down and lose it. Some are just like, it is what it is. Like we saw with this family here, super sad. My hope, my prayer is that this, this innocent child winds up in a loving home and in a place where someone shows them, you know, the way they were being raised and the conditions they were being raised is not normal.
Yeah, and it was so well put, because just the fact that I mean, the picture is just heartbreaking. You just see this crib and you just think of a child, and I have kids myself, and as them growing up, thinking of that's what was around this child, it's just really hard picture to look at. Not to put you on the spot,
But I think it's important too to realize that there is absolutely no excuse. I don't care, if I don't care if you've lost your job, you've been out of a job since COVID. There's no excuse for living in these types of conditions. My dog's pen outside is a hell of a lot cleaner than this. No excuse. I don't want any comments of you don't know what it's like to be. There's no excuse for this, period.
No, no, and the pictures speak for themselves, and even I think too, knowing that they were in a rural farming community, they had chickens, they had that, like it's not, when you look at the pictures and there's crates inside the house, like that's not a proper place. I'm not a farmer myself, but that's not a proper place to keep animals. To put you on a spot, chat, I mean, is it even legal to have a raccoon as a pet in a house? What is the law? I know that's an on-the-spot question, but I just think of what they had in the house and what additional charges beyond animal abuse, just the fact that they had so many animals in the house. Like, how do you even get those animals?
I can't answer that. It's funny. I remember doing a story, I don't know, it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago on Sidebar or on Law&Crime with Jesse, where this guy had a pet monkey. And it brought me back to, there was a guy here in the upstate in Greenville that actually had a pet Bengal tiger. He had the correct permitting. He had these special cages, but he would drive down the road and have these giant cage in the back of the pickup truck. And I remember the first time, I never even knew about this guy. There was a call about a guy driving down a major highway. He's got a lion in the back. And I was like, our call taker's got to be on drugs or drunk. Well, sure as heck, I get behind it. I'm like, there's a tiger back here. We have people that have exotic animals, very poisonous snakes. As far as raccoons and these types of animals, I am not sure. I can't answer that question. Don't really have much expertise on that. But I do know that there are permits that you can get for certain types of animals, and especially people that do rescues and things like that. 40 various animals in a small residence, that's not going to cut it.
No, and even if they had the permitting, and I'm no expert on that either, I mean, when you just look at the conditions, there's no way that that's how animals are supposed to be kept. Certainly not the way a child is supposed to be taken care of in a home. And hopefully,
Sure,
to your point, that child finds a safe and loving home as this case continues forward. Chad Ayers, it's always great to have you on Law&Crime. Thanks for coming on.
thank you so much.
Court records state the status of Foley and Renard's cases as pending. That will do it for this episode of On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.